The year was 1912, a time of grand ambitions and even grander ships. The RMS Titanic, the most magnificent vessel of its time, was set to embark on its maiden voyage from Southampton, England, to New York City. Known as the Ship of Dreams, Titanic was a pinnacle of human engineering, a marvel boasting luxurious suites, a grand staircase, and the promise of an unsinkable journey across the Atlantic. Among the many passengers aboard were two people whose paths should never have crossed: Jack Dawson, a free-spirited artist from Wisconsin, and Rose DeWitt Bukater, a young aristocratic woman trapped in a life she never wanted. Rose, engaged to the wealthy and cruel Carl Oakley, found herself suffocated by the expectations of high society and her overbearing mother. As fate would have it, Jack won the third-class tickets aboard the Titanic in a lucky poker game. While he boarded with nothing but his art supplies and a thirst for adventure, Rose boarded with a heavy heart, a future dictated by the wealth and control of Carl. But destiny had other plans. One fateful evening, Rose, overwhelmed by despair, stood at the stern of the Titanic, contemplating throwing herself into the freezing Atlantic waters below. Just as she was about to let go, Jack appeared, speaking to her with a sincerity and passion that no one in her world ever had. "You jump, I jump," he told her. And in that moment, a bond was formed, one that would change both of their lives forever. As the days passed, Jack and Rose grew closer. He showed her a world beyond wealth and status, a world filled with freedom, art, and love. From the wind-swept bow of the ship, where he famously told her to trust him as she spread her arms wide, to the intimate moment where he sketched her, wearing only the art of devotion likeness, their love blossomed, despite the impossible circumstances. But their love was met with the opposition. Carl, fired by jealousy, sought to rid himself of Jack, praying him for theft and having him locked away below deck. The moment of confrontation came just as disaster struck. The Titanic had collided with an iceberg, and panic swept through the ship as it became clear that the unsinkable was indeed sinking. The sound of chaos filled the underbelly of the Titanic as Jack struggled against the cold steel of his handcuffs. The ship had struck the iceberg, and already the walls groaned under the weight of incoming water. The dimly lit corridors flickered with the fading glow of electric lamps as the icy Atlantic water crept up the walls like an unrelenting shadow. Above deck, Rose fought her way through the panicked crowd, searching desperately for a way to free Jack. The ship's once lavish halls were now a battlefield of desperation. Passengers pushing, shoving, and scrabbling for lifeboats. She barely noticed the sharp glances of Carl, her former fiancé, who still looked nearby, determined not to let her slip away. But Rose's mind was fixed on one thing. Jack had risked everything for her, and she would not let him drown in the belly of this sinking giant. Below deck, Jack's fingers had turned numb as he twisted and pulled against the restraints, water rising up to his waist. He called out, his voice echoing off the flooding walls. It was then that Rose appeared, breathless, holding a fire axe she had grabbed from a nearby emergency case. "Jack!" she cried. "Rose, you have to hurry!" Jack's voice was tight with urgency as the freezing water climbed higher. Her hands trembled, but she steadied herself, lifting the house. Jack squeezed his eyes shut, bracing himself. With one strong swing, the chains chattered, and Jack was free. He wasted no time, pulling Rose into his arms for the briefest, most relieved moment before grabbing her hand. "Let's go." Together, they raced through the flooding corridors, fighting against the rising water and the chaos of passengers still struggling to reach the upper decks. As they ran, Jack turned to Rose, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "No matter what happens, Rose, promise me you will never let go." "I promise," she whispered, gripping his hand even tighter. By the time they reached the deck, the Titanic was already at a terrifying angle, its bow submerged beneath the waves, while passengers screamed and clung to whatever they could. Crew members practically loaded the last of the lifeboats, but chaos had taken over. The ship's great frame groaned, metal twisted under the weight of impending doom. Jack and Rose ran past a group of wealthy men trying to bribe their way onto a boat. Others, mothers, children, and old couples, held each other, accepting their fates. Among them, Rose caught sight of Cap, his usual arrogance stripped away, his eyes hollow as he stood alone. But she felt nothing for him now. Her world was Jack. The stern of the ship began to rise, and as the ship tilted further, Jack grabbed Rose's hand and pulled her toward the railings. "We have to jump," he said firmly. Rose's heart pounded. "Jack, no! It's either that or we go down with the ship." With one last deep breath, they leaped into the freezing ocean, just as the mighty hull finally cracked apart. The once great Titanic groaned like a wounded beast, its lights flickering out before the sea swallowed it whole. The water was brutal. Icy waves crushed the breath from their lungs as they surfaced, struggling against the biting cold. Around them, people screamed, calling for help, splashing in the darkness. Jack held onto Rose, keeping her afloat as they pushed through the wreckage. Then, in the distance, a wooden panel large enough for one floated toward them. Jack guided Rose onto it, helping her balance as she gasped for breath. But when he tried to pull himself up, the board wobbled dangerously. "It won't hold us both," he muttered. "No, Jack, don't." He smiled, brushing her wet hair back. "You are going to survive, Rose. You promise me." Tears mixed with the sweat water on her face as she watched him hold onto the edge of the plank, his body trembling from the cold. "I won't let go, Jack." As the night stretched on, the cries around them faded into silence. Almost all the drowned victims had died, and their bodies floating on the cold, endless waters. The ocean became eerily still. Rose's body ached, her limbs numb, but she held onto Jack's hand, whispering his name. Then salvation came. A faint light in the distance, the sound of an approaching rescue boat. Rose turned to Jack, but his grip had loosened. His eyes, once filled with life, now stared blankly at the stars. "No, Jack!" Her sobs ran through her as she gently pried his frozen fingers away, pressing one last kiss to his cold hands before letting him sink beneath the waves. With the last of her strength, she forced herself into the water, swimming toward the rescue boats. She survived that night, but she would never forget. And unbeknownst to her, Jack's story was far from over. The icy waters of the North Atlantic had claimed hundreds of lives that night, their bodies swallowed by the merciless sea. Among them was Jack Dawson. As Jack's body sank beneath the icy waters, the weight of the ocean pulling him into darkness. But fate had other plans. A local fishing boat from Greenland, captained by an old sailor named Eric Dawson, was making its round near the wreckage, hoping to find anything of use. As Eric peered into the depths, his sharp eyes caught the faint glimmer of something beneath the waves. Their nets, cast in hope of catching fish, instead pulled up a lifeless body, his skin pale, lips blue, and breath long stony by the cold. The captain, Eric, looked upon Jack and murmured ancient words. To the untrained eye, Jack was gone, but Eric saw something, a flicker of life buried deep within. "Pull him up," Eric commanded. His crew, hardened by the hardships, worked quickly. They hauled Jack's body aboard, laying him near the fire. He was barely breathing, his pulse so weak that it was almost undetectable. The fishermen wrapped him in thick furs and began rubbing his skin to restore circulation. The crew rushed him to the remote coastal village, where old traditions of healing and survival would be tested against death itself. Eric's wife, Ingrid, a woman well versed in old Nordic healing methods, stepped forward. She crushed herbs into a steaming broth and poured a few drops between Jack's frozen lips. Days passed, then a miracle happened. Jack coughed, his chest heaving with effort as his eyes fluttered open. Where am I?" he croaked. "You are alive," Ingrid whispered. "The sea did not take you." But survival came at a cost. Jack's body was weak, his mind clouded. He had been given his second chance at life, but his heart still remained in the past with Rose. For weeks, Jack lay unconscious in a small wooden cabin, warmed by thick furs and lost by the villagers. Heated stones were placed around his body, herbs steeped into teas, and hands pressed against his chest to draw life back into him. One night, in a fever dream, Jack saw Rose's face, heard her voice calling his name through the waves. He gasped awake, coughing violently as his breath returned, his heart pounding as though it had been fighting against the abyss itself. Yet, when he tried to recall how he got there, his mind was a blur. His memories, like shattered glass, reflected only fragments: an elegant ship, music in the ballroom, the scream of twisting metal, and a red-haired woman fading into the night. His red squares told him that no one else had been found, that if he had lost someone in the wreckage, they were long gone. Heartbroken and adrift in his own mind, Jack was given a new life among the villagers. He learned their ways, fishing, carving, surviving in the cold landscapes, but deep inside, a part of him always felt missing. 10 years passed, and though Jack had built a simple but peaceful life, the pieces of his past haunted him in dreams. One morning, while visiting the local trading post, his eyes fell upon a newspaper from America. His heart stayed. There, on the front page, was an article remembering the tragedy of the Titanic on its 10th anniversary, and beside it, a photograph of a familiar face, Rose. She was alive. A rush of emotions flooded him: relief, joy, fear. The name below the picture confirmed it: Rose DeWitt Bukater. She was mentioned in connection to an upcoming marriage, to none other than Carl Oakley, Rose's fiancé from the Titanic ship, and now a wealthy businessman in New York. Jack's hand trembled as he traced her image. The woman he had fought to save, the woman he had loved beyond reason, was alive and about to marry another. It was in that moment that everything came rushing back. The ship, the iceberg, the promise they made to never let go. And yet, she had let go. Not by choice. Perhaps she waited for almost 10 years. But maybe she had believed he had died. And maybe she had moved on. But he had to know the truth. Determined, Jack made a choice that would change everything. He would find her. The grand city of New York, bathed in the golden hues of a setting sun, pulsed with life as Jack stepped onto its streets for the first time in 10 years. His heart pounded with anticipation and dread as he walked through familiar avenues that had once been nothing more than a distant dream. He clutched the crumbled address given to him by the kind fisherman's son, an address that led to Rose's new home. Jack found himself standing before a grand estate, its towering columns and lavish gardens, a stark contrast to the life he once knew. He barely had time to gather his thoughts when the heavy doors swung open, and there she was, Rose. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Her fairy red hair was pinned in a graceful undo. Her eyes still held the same depth of emotion. Yet, there was something else. Years of loss, longing, and an acceptance of fate. The world blurred as they locked eyes. 1,000 words unspoken. Jack, she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded, his throat dry. It's me, Rose. I found my way back to you. Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached out, touching his face as if to confirm it was real. You were gone. I searched for you. I mourned you. Jack took her hands in his rough fingers brushing against the softness of her skin. I survived, but I didn't know how to find you. I never stopped loving you, Rose. Before she could speak, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted the moment. From the doorway, a man in an elegant suit stood watching. Carl Oakley. The man Rose was set to marry in just 3 days. Rose, who is this? Carl asked, his voice laced with both curiosity and authority. She turned to Jack, eyes pleading for understanding. Jack, this is Carl. He has been good to me. Jack felt the weight of reality settle him. He had returned, but time had not waited for him. The night was filled with tension as Jack and Rose stole a moment away from the grand estate, walking through a quiet park where the autumn leaves swayed in the cold breeze. Rose, tell me you don't love him, Jack implored, his voice raw with emotion. She sighed, rubbing her arms against the chill. Jack, after I lost you, I was lost. Carl was kind to me when I had no one. He isn't you, but he gave me stability when my world fell apart. Jack clenched his fist. I came back for you. We were meant to be, Rose. We still are. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she turned to him, her heart warring between love and responsibility. What if we run away? She whispered. What if we leave everything behind and start again? Jack's heart leaped at the idea, but as it looked into her eyes, He saw something deeper: fear, uncertainty, the weight of the life she had built. She has spent a decade trying to heal, trying to survive without him. You don't truly believe we can, do you? Jack said softly. Rose sobbed, shaking her head. I want to, Jack, but my life has changed. I have responsibilities now. It's not just about love. It's about everything else. The realization hit Jack like a wave crashing against the shore. He had fought to return to her, but he could not fight time. With a deep breath, he smiled despite the pain tearing at his soul. Then, we said goodbye properly this time. Rose's breath itched. What do you mean? Jack took her hand gently. Meet me tomorrow night, on the deck of a ship, one last time. A silent understanding passed between them. A farewell, not forced by fate, but by choice. The sun cast golden streaks across the ocean as Jack stood at the railing of a grand ship, gazing at the endless horizon. The same ocean that had once tried to claim his life now aired his final moment with the woman he had loved beyond time itself. The salty breeze carried the whispers of a past they could never reclaim. Yet, it was here that their story had to find its ending. Behind him, footsteps approached, soft yet persistent. Jack knew it was her. He had spent 10 years lost to the world, only to return and find her standing at the crossroads of love and duty. He turned slowly, and there she was. Her airborne hair catching the last rays of the sun. Her eyes filled with the unspoken words of a love that still burned despite the years. Jack, Rose's voice wavered, her hands clenching the fabric of her dress, as if holding on to something she could not bear to let go. Tell me this isn't real, that I won't have to choose between my past and my future. Jack took a step forward. The pain of his decision etched into the every fiber of his being. Rose, you don't have to say it. I already know. He swallowed hard, forcing a smile to his lips. You found a life, a good one. I won't be the ghost that haunts you. Tears welled in her eyes. But you are not a ghost. Jack, you are here. You are real. Her voice cracked as she stepped closer. A trembling hand reaching for his. I never stopped loving you. Jack exhaled shakingly, lifting her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss against her fingers, cherishing the warmth that he would never hold again. And I never stopped loving you, Rose. But love isn't just about holding on. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let go. The silence stretched between them, heavy and filled with hushed tears. The ship rocked gently beneath them, mirroring the storm within their hearts. But we could, Rose began, her voice barely a whisper. Jack shook his head. If we tried to turn back time, we destroy everything that came after. You have a life, Rose, a home, people who love you. I won't take that from you. She looked away, blinking rapidly to hold back her tears. So, this is goodbye then? Jack nodded, his own eyes glistening. A goodbye, but never an ending. I will always be with you. In the stars, in the waves, in the wind, just like I promised. A single tear slid down Rose's cheek as Jack took a step back. The space between them grew wider, and with it, a aching realization that failed at giving them a second chance, not to be together, but to say the goodbye they never had. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver locket. Inside, a faded sketch of her, drawn by Jack on that fateful voyage all those years ago. Without a word, she pressed it into his hand, closing his fingers around it. "So you never forget." Jack nodded, his throat too tight to speak. The ship's horn bellowed, a final call. Ruth stepped back, holding his gaze one last time before she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Jack stood motionless, his heart heavy but at peace. He looked down at the locket in his palm, then at the vast ocean that stretched before him. He had survived the Titanic. He had found his way back, and now it was time to let go. As the ship sailed forward, carrying them to different destinies, the stars above shimmered, silent witnesses to a love that had defied death, but not time.